Hello, I'm David Debato, and this is the Dictators Live on Monday, May 25th, 2026, which here in the United States of America is Memorial Day. So, on that note, it gives me great pleasure to invite my very special guest, Generalleutnant Ben Hodges. Willkommen, Ben. Wie geht's?
It's gave me a good. Thank you for the invitation, Dave.
You bet. You bet. Ben's been here several times, and I'm really always glad to have him join me again. And as always, Ben, this has been another one of these weeks.
Yeah.
So I won't get into that. Two topics today. I mean, it's always pretty much only two topics recently, and that's of course what's going on in Europe, NATO, EU, and then the war in Iran. It's kind of sad that we're not talking as much about Ukraine, and we will touch on that. But the war in Iran has just totally taken over the news cycles, even with most of the podcasters. So let me ask you this, though. I don't know how much you've been asked about this recently, probably a lot. I haven't had the chance to look at a lot of the podcasts recently, but President Trump's recent redecision of a decision that he rescinded and remade again about sending 5,000 troops to Poland. I know he rescinded, if that's the correct word, of deploying 4,000 troops from, and I forget what exact unit that was. I think out of into Vilsec, that we're going to rotate, a rotational force. Now he is saying that they're not going there, but he's going to be sending 5,000 troops to Poland. Could you tell us anything about that? Is that going to happen? Do we know from day to day and exactly where in Poland and what troops are they?
Well, you are not alone in being confused about what's actually been decided, what's going to happen. The state of play right now seems to be that, and there's basically three different pieces of this. Number one was a decision a couple of weeks ago by the president to withdraw 5,000 troops from Germany. And it was done or conveyed in such a way to make it look as if it was punishment for the German Bundeskanzler because the president didn't like a criticism of the president's plan for Iran by Chancellor Merz. So I think actually this had probably been in the works for some time, but it was released and said in such a way that inferred he was unhappy with Merz. Now, since then, I've heard almost nothing about this 5,000. In Pentagon math, if you cancel a deployment somewhere, that could count as a cut. And there was a cancellation of a planned deployment of a long-range precision strike battalion that was supposed to come to Germany that would provide a critical capability. That was canceled. The other 4,000, I think most people are guessing, and we are speculating, that this would be the Stryker Brigade, the 2nd Stryker Cavalry Regiment, which is based in Vilsec, Germany. It's the only permanently assigned quasi-armored formation in Europe that belongs to the U.S. Army. And the announcement came that this would happen in the next year to 18 months. That's a tall order. You're talking about that regiment plus all their families and so on. And are you talking about inactivation, or do they go to Poland or Romania, or do they go back to the States? None of this is clear. I would expect the people at U.S. European Command in Stuttgart and U.S. Army Europe in Wiesbaden would have a better idea, but I'm not seeing or hearing anything that provides clarity. So that's one thing. The second thing then was the very surprising announcement that the deployment of the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team from the 1st Cavalry Division at Fort Hood, Texas, which would actually, that rotation was already underway. I mean, this was a BCT that was going to be based in Poland, but battalions, in a battalion, of course, most of your listeners know that's around 700, 800, 900 soldiers, depending on what type of battalion. And generally 5 battalions in a brigade of infantry, armor, artillery, combat support, service support, etc. And that brigade was going to be deployed across the Baltic countries and in Poland and in Bulgaria. that was canceled while the president was in China, and after the BCT had already started deploying. So the unit had already had a farewell ceremony. You even had some of the guys were already in theater, and some of the equipment was already there. And then the president, 4 or 5 days later, countermands that and says, "No, we are going to deploy." Of course, the way he says it makes it sound like it's an additional 5,000, which is even more confusing. But I think it was in response to a very strong, disappointed Polish reaction. And also the Congress is like, wait a minute, what? Why are you punishing Poland? And why would we be decreasing capability in Europe in the middle of a war? So I'm sorry, I don't think I'm adding any clarity, but this to try and understand the facts as we think they are. And now, of course, it's all speculation about are we double counting? What's actually happening? Now, the last thing I'd say, and this is kind of the third part of this, is that, the Pentagon would say, wait a minute, we told you months ago that, under the national security strategy, we were going to reduce in Europe and that we were going to focus on the homeland, and in Indo-Pacific, Europe can take care of itself by and large. Okay, that's a true statement. They did say that. Well, then why 7 months later is the Armor Brigade in the process of deploying and you stop it? I mean, we look incompetent, very confusing. And by the way, it's a terrible way to treat soldiers and families to get whipsawed around like that. So I think we've got a problem of either communications between the White House and the Pentagon, between the U.S. and our allies. I think you've got some degree of incompetence or frankly disdain. They don't care. Most of the people, it seems, in the office of the Secretary of Defense don't really care a whole lot for allies anyway.
Well, Ben, don't apologize for not adding any more clarity to this, because your informed opinion, as murky as you think it is about as good as we're going to get. I mean, because you've been there, done that, especially when it comes to U.S. troops, Army troops in Europe, both rotational troops and as well as the permanently stationed U.S. Army troops in Europe. And the thing of it is, and I agree with everything you said about how insulting this is. Not just to our allies, but to the families. Like you said, people don't usually think about that. And you're right. They were, many of them, in process of they were packed up, actually. And it was just before they were deployed and to get on the aircraft to come over here. The forward deployment, the headquarters and so forth, I think many of them were already there. And the other thing, and that really bothers me, not just about this, but in many, many of the decisions made recently by this administration, is the cavalier attitude, the insulting attitude that they have towards our allies. In this case, specifically Poland. And I understand really about how, Polish officials, diplomats and elected officials have to say that, the right thing and try to gloss this over and not insult Trump in public or Hegseth, but they were blindsided. There's no question about this. And as you said, Poland of all countries, leading the way with increasing their defense budget and the buildup of their military, to have them blindsided with this, to me is just unbelievable. And I have to ask an obvious question. I don't know if you have an answer, but I do. For me, do you think that these troops are actually ever going to see Polish soil?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the president turned it back on. So that the ABCT deployment is going to happen.
Okay.
So you have to wonder, okay, was there an incompetence in the Pentagon or just misunderstanding, or did somebody try to do something before it could be stopped? I mean, honestly, I don't know. I am very sure that the leadership in Stuttgart at EUCOM, at U.S. European Command, and in Wiesbaden at U.S. Army Europe were caught by surprise as well. So, I mean, if this was incompetence or somebody did something willfully against what was agreed, then they don't need to be in that job anymore. Um,
Well,
yeah.
let me ask you this, Ben, because of your positions in the past, and for those of you that may not know, Ben was the commander of U.S. Army Europe. And so he speaks from a position of authority as far as how things work, at least within the U.S. military in Europe. And of course, you've had many, many interactions with the highest level leadership in the Pentagon. So let me ask you this. I know you're not on, active duty, but right now, who in the Pentagon, who in the U.S. military leadership would be responsible for issuing such an order or for allowing such actions or inactions in this case to take place?
Well, the most people who are watching this and who are frustrated with it are pointing the finger at the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy, Bridge Colby. Now, I don't know for a fact that's him. He wouldn't be the guy that would write the order, but he would have developed the policy recommendations, and he would have some authority as an assistant to Secretary Hegseth. Secretary Hegseth, of course, was in China with the president as well. But of course, they have communication. It's not like, something like this is not a spur of the moment decision. Should not be. Now, it could be that Hegseth and Colby believed that they were carrying out commander's intent from the president to reduce, and they made a terrible choice. But, Dave, I'm reluctant to speculate too much because I just don't know all the facts. But what makes me feel confident in criticizing is that they have demonstrated from day one that they are disdainful of allies. And that you used the word cavalier earlier, which I think is exactly right. And frankly, it's hard to trust anything that comes out of the Pentagon based on a record of not being truthful or accurate.
Well, that's my point. You can't trust them. And as you know, I say a lot more harsh words, and I use more harsh words with the Pentagon, with Hegseth and Trump, because their actions are costing lives. Not just American lives, but the lives of our allies. And even if they're not our allies, civilian casualties because of the cavalier, incompetent attitude that's going out. As always, you're pressed for time, but I want to play a brief clip. I think it's a minute or less. I'm going to cut it off anyway. It has to do with the leadership in the Pentagon, exactly what we're talking about. And this was from a hearing a few days ago. And I don't know if you saw any of it or read it about any of it. But it has to do with Admiral Cooper, CENTCOM commander, very, very distinguished career. Really, he's done it all. And, but his testimony, after this is done, I'll give you my opinion, but watch this. And again, it's a brief clip. I'm going to play about a minute of it.
Well, I just read the provision to you. I just literally read the provision to you. Does it prohibit you or anyone else from declaring that no quarter be given? I just read it to you. I just read it to you. I just read it to you.
Yes, sir.
You're a combatant commander. You're one of our most senior military officers with tens of thousands of service members under your command. Does the Law of War Manual state that it is prohibited to declare that no quarter be given?
It prohibits a large number of things.
No, I've asked you.
I will follow.
I just read the provision to you. I just literally read the provision to you. Does it prohibit you or anyone else from declaring that no quarter be given? I just read it to you.
We will follow everything that's in the law.
Answer the question, Admiral Cooper. You have tens of thousands of service members under your command.
And
I literally just read a provision from the Law of War Manual, our own manual. Will you not just say what I just read to you?
I will say that we will follow the law of armed conflict to the T.
Ben, I'll be honest with you. It makes me sick. I'm sorry. I was enraged. You may have a very different opinion. You may think that he said exactly what he should say under the circumstances. I, having been nowhere near that level in the military, of course, vehemently disagree as a veteran, but also just as an American. He can't even agree to a statement made in his own rule of law manual. I know what he's trying to do, but it makes me disgusted. And it gets right to the root, I think, of what we just talked about. I don't know if you want to call that incompetence, but I don't even know. I think it goes beyond cavalier. The attitude, the attitude in the Pentagon about how they can do whatever they want and kind of ignore their own regulations. Your thoughts on what you just heard and saw?
Well, Admiral Cooper certainly has a terrific reputation. I don't know him, but by everything I'd ever read about him before this was that he's an exceptionally talented officer,
Absolutely.
a good man. But this goes back to that infamous speech in Quantico with Secretary Hegseth up on the stage prancing around in front of the hundreds of generals and admirals and sergeants major and master chiefs and I suspect Admiral Cooper would have been in that room, where Secretary Hegseth says, none of these woke rules of engagement, we exist to kill things and break things and kill people. And so it's this attitude, which is kind of a junior lieutenant view of the world that spends all his time playing Call of Duty, that how he thinks about things. And it has permeated, unfortunately, to some extent. That would even be a question about no quarter given. I mean, what movie did the secretary see that in where he thinks that's cool to say? Now, I can't say what the admiral said was wrong or right because I don't know the whole context. I mean, what were all the questions that led up to that? And certainly Congressman Crow is a person I do know personally and is one of the most respected members of the House of Representatives and a veteran himself with multiple deployments. So you would think that the admiral could have said, of course, yes, Mr. Crow, I just heard what you read right out of the manual for Courts Martial, and I understand, of course, you're right, and be done with it. But if there's something he didn't, then it just makes me wonder, what did I not hear in the broader context? But I put the full blame on the Secretary of Defense and the culture he is trying to inculcate that somehow, to say no quarter given, that's really hua, and that we're about lethality and killing people and breaking things, which of course leads to the mistaken and wrong-headed mentality that, that winning equals destroying all the enemy's ships or whatever, as opposed to, did you accomplish the strategic objective? And so that's why it's such a problem. And it's got to be incredibly frustrating for the women and men in leadership positions in all of our services having to operate in that.
I could spend the whole program on this, an episode. I really could, honestly, on that. I can't tell you how upset that made me, but we don't have the time. So I want to move along to Iran, if we could, in the remaining minutes that we have. And I'm just going to put this up on the screen first. This has to do with Secretary Rubio and him saying that a possible deal is possible today, rather, on the war in Iran. Folks can read that themselves, but basically he's saying they're very close. We are very close. Both sides are very close. There's, of course, some things we haven't nailed down yet, blah, blah, blah. But as Trump said, it's largely been negotiated. Well, then you can read this, where Iran disagrees and says that they're refusing to hand over uranium in a pending U.S. peace deal. And they deny that there is any real things going on here, any truce that is anywhere near ready at this point. And let me, no, I don't need to play that, I guess. Well, that's what Rubio says. I do have a very brief clip from the Iranian side, just brief. If you could respond to this, I want to play it. It's a minute or less.
This is a developing story, Ali. So, what is developed? Well, I was in touch with one of my sources, and a source in Tehran, an official source in Tehran, told me that, yes, there is a deal. And according to my sources, the draft proposal that's supposed to be finalized include end of war on all fronts, including Lebanon, freeing several $billions of Iran's blocked funds, lifting the U.S. naval blockade and opening the Strait of Hormuz, withdrawal of American forces from the immediate vicinity of Iran. After this, the parties will have 30 days to agree on the nuclear issue. These 30 days can be extended by mutual agreement. During these 30 days, passage will be facilitated through the strait. According to my sources in Tehran, in this paper, management of the Strait of Hormuz will be an Iranian-Omani issue and is being negotiated with Moscow.
این که در زمینه بخش زیادی از موضوعات مورد گفتگو ما به یک جمع‌بندی رسیدیم امر درستی است. اما اینکه بگیم که این به معنای این هست که امضای یک توافق قریب الوقوع است، کسی نمیتواند چنین ادعایی بکند. به همون دلایلی که بخشش خودتون گفتید، جزئیات موضوع هسته‌ای صحبتی نداریم. تهدیدها و فشارها و تصویر کشیدنها و کاریکاتور منتشر کردن خب بخشی از سیاست ورزی در اون طرف دنیاست.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if any of this is agreed to, it would seem to take us back to February 27th before the war started and not really solve any of the issues that we went to war over. Correct me.
Well, I hate to say it, but I put more validity into what the Iranians are saying than I do what comes out of the White House when it comes to this, or from our Secretary of State. I mean, I know that this is a common negotiating pressure tactic to try and build up whatever, but the credibility of our side is pretty grim right now. When you say we're 95% there, except for the three biggest issues, you know, I think that it's just the president has gotten us, we have gotten ourselves into a really dire situation, and he's either going to have to swallow this or hope it goes away, hope that China or somebody solves it for him, or the worst case is you go back in with a whole bunch of military force and nothing good's going to come out of that. So I think that, and by the way, when the Iranian there says that the management of the Strait of Hormuz will be handled by the Omani and Iranians. Mm-hmm. So much for international water. So that we're talking about a toll, whatever you call it, even if they don't call it a toll. And I don't know how this is making America great again. This has been effed up on so many levels, despite the incredible competence of our Navy and our Air Force, our special operators, what they have done, the way they have carried out their tasks. The problem is, as I alluded earlier, it doesn't matter how many Iranian Navy vessels are destroyed if they still can block the strait. It is almost irrelevant. Good that a lot of them are gone, but you've got the same government. They still have the uranium, and they've blocked the Strait of Hormuz, and now it looks like they're going to be making money off of it. And there's not much that we can do about it. And so the president and his enablers are going to have to work really hard to spin this as somehow this is a good thing. And more important to the president is that this is a better outcome than what the Obama administration achieved. Because that's what he's always measuring.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about it all the time. He is completely obsessed with Obama and Biden.
Ben, it seems as if they agree to even most of what they're talking about, what you and I just heard from both sides. Iran and Oman will pretty much, run the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is going to be able to charge tolls. They're actually, Iran seems like they may be getting reparations for what we destroyed, which is pretty incredible for the war that we initiated. Oh, yeah. And it seems as if Iran is not going to give up their enriched uranium. Again, I am stupid. I'm a schmuck. I realize that, but it doesn't seem as if we're getting any of the goals or that we went to war for. And as you said, how is this helping the national security of the United States? How is it helping any Americans whatsoever who are looking at now almost $5 a gallon across the United States for gas, which I understand is going to go to $6 and $7 a gallon this summer? How is that helping us?
Yeah. I have nothing else to add, Dave. I mean, I think it's all been said many times by many people. And so we'll see how the president, what he decides to do.
Well, let me ask you this in closing, because I know you've got to go, but this is something I know you know quite a bit about. How has this war so far, and you've been asked this before, has this war still really helped? Well, I'll just say Russia. Leave China out of this for now. That's a more complex issue. Has the war in Iran helped Russia significantly or just temporarily? And then it's going to go way down and they're not going to get so much out of it.
Well, I would say temporarily in that Russia is getting, the spike in oil prices helps Russia. And the fact that our administration does not, has granted exemptions to the Russians on sanctions. So there's a period of time where Russia is getting more income as a result of this. That's not decisive because of what the Ukrainians are doing, but I think that's probably the extent of the benefit for the Russians.
And we'll close on that note. And I just want to tell you, Ben, the next time we talk, I do want to maybe spend the entire episode on Ukraine because they are doing some incredible things. They've turned the whole.
I'm much more optimistic than I was.
I am too. I know you are. And it makes me feel good. But anyway, the next time, let's spend the majority of the time on Ukraine because they're changing the world.
Yeah.
In the world, not just Europe. So we'll have to close on that note. Ben Hodges, former commander of U.S. Army Europe, and I'm proud to say a good friend of mine. So you take care and let us stay in touch and have you back soon.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
You bet.